Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show here on Friday, November the 11th, 2016 is Veterans Day. Tip of the cap to all the men and women that have served this great country of ours. My name is Matt Bernier here in the Daily Racing Forum studio, Midtown Manhattan. It's a nice day here in the city. Hopefully it's as nice wherever you are. If you're watching live on DRF Live, live.drf.com, thank you for doing so. If you check this thing out, podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, iTunes, all sorts of ways for you to find the show. Today's going to be an interesting sort of... We're wrapping things up. The Breeders' Cup was last weekend, obviously, out at Santa Anita. We had really top to bottom, everything you could possibly ask for. All the stars delivered, all the upsets sort of, I don't want to say all the upsets, there were only a handful of them, but you had these sort of big bombs, big balloons that you may have wanted. You had all of the big names deliver and really put forth tremendous performances. And today, in the first part anyway, I kind of want to try to do something we did similarly post-Travers after Arrogate went out and just ran a hole in the wind. And I didn't think we'd be talking about necessarily another giant performance. Figured he would run a good race. Didn't know if he was going to be good enough to win or not and beat California Chrome. But now we're starting to get into real sort of historical things with this horse. Before we dive into all the nuts and bolts about it, let's take a look at the most recent run. Let's see what happened. The Breeders' Cup Classic from the top of the lane.
Frosted is next from Keen Ice. Top of the stretch, California Chrome is a length in front, but he faces an uncommon opponent today. Arrogate tries hard to reel in California Chrome. California Chrome with Espinosa going for the whip is still in front. Arrogate trying his heart out. California Chrome from Arrogate, a pulsating climax to the Classic. Arrogate takes the lead and wins. Arrogate beat California Chrome.
Great call from Michael Rona. Really, he handled his first Breeders' Cup, I thought, in tremendous fashion, as did Larry Colmos for the NBC calls. You see Arrogate gets up, Mike Smith aboard, obviously Juddmonte Farms, Bob Baffert. Baffert, who couldn't buy a win in the Breeders' Cup Classic, has ripped off 3 in a row now. California Chrome, valiant in defeat. He's not going to lose anything in this race as far as not getting the win, as far as his overall body of work is concerned. More importantly, though, you look and see from a Beyer speed figure standpoint, this race for Arrogate came back as a 120. This is on the heels of a 122 in the Grade 1 Travers back in August at Saratoga. Shattered every record at 1.25 miles up at the Spa. And now we're getting into the real sort of historical stuff. Let's take a look, if we could, at Arrogate's PPs just to give everyone sort of an idea of what we're dealing with. This is a horse that's raced 6 times in his career. His only defeat was in his career debut at Los Alamitos, going 3/4 mile. As we now know, this is a horse that wants every bit of 10 furlongs, so I'm not going to hold that loss to Westbrook, and a pretty good horse in Accelerate who acquitted himself very nicely in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I'm not going to hold that first race against him. All he's done since is go out and win and just put on some significant, some serious shows. He's already earned over $4 million in 6 lifetime starts. He's 5 of 6 for Baffert. You've always got to be concerned. You see who his dad is. Unbridled Song. That's always got to be a little bit of a concern, just simply because they're not the most sound creatures you'll ever see on the racetrack. But at the end of the day, this is a supremely talented animal. Let's dive into the real sort of nuts and bolts, though, to try to wrap our heads around. We did this after the Travers just because it was just such an absurd performance. And it felt like, it looked like the real deal. He got his final quarter, sub 25 seconds. But you never know. Is it a flash in the pan? Was it a one-off thing? Or is this sort of a once-in-a-lifetime kind of animal? Well, I went through. We've got some things to our fingertips, our access here in the Racing Forum offices in New York. And you can pull up more sort of in-depth numbers. Now, anyone that wants to go back and fact-check these things, I'm not going to say don't, because I did this last night before I left. So I think everything here is entirely accurate. If you want to go back and double-check it and just make sure whether I'm right or wrong, that's on you, and I actually would appreciate that, just to make sure. But based on the numbers that I kind of cultivated, I went back to 1984. That was the first year of the Breeders' Cup World Championships. I have all of the numbers as far as 3-year-olds earning Beyer speed figures above 120 and above, going back to 1984. There have only been 10 3-year-olds that have earned Beyer speed figures of 120 or greater. And I say 10 3-year-olds, it's 10 performances, not 10 3-year-olds. Arrogate has 2 of them. There is no other horse on that list that has more than 1. And we're talking about names like Holy Bull. We're talking about American Pharoah. We're talking about Medagliadoro. It's not as though these are sort of, you know, bums. We're talking about the cream of the crop, the best of the best. He has 2 of the 10 fastest 3-year-old performances since 1984, and really that's essentially saying since the Beyers became public. It may have been a few years prior to that Andy Beyer came to the agreement with putting these in the Thoroughbred Times and whatnot. But we're talking about a historically fast horse as far as 3-year-olds are concerned. Now, if you want to go a little bit farther and dig deeper into the numbers, at 10 furlongs, at 1.25 miles, there have been 10 races at 1.25 miles where you've had, since 1984, since January 1st, 1984, there have been 10 instances where a horse running 10 furlongs has gained and earned a Beyer speed figure of 120 or greater. We're talking about Ghost Zapper with the 124, Aptitude with the 123, Best Pal with the 123, Candy Ride a 123, American Pharaoh with a 120, Sea Cadet 120, Lava Man 120, Skip Away 120. There are 2 more performances, and they both belong to Arrogate. The difference, too, when we're talking historically, Arrogate, you've got to keep in mind, he's run 6 times. And we always talk about it, 3-year-olds later in the season, in the fall, they can blossom, they can continue to grow. But we also say with racing, they're going to continue to grow and continue to improve. The notion that this horse hasn't really reached his peak ability, I don't know that I can sit here and say to anyone watching or listening that I'm thinking this horse could run a 130, because that just sounds ridiculous. But it doesn't seem entirely impossible, considering he's so lightly raced and he's accomplished so much in short amount of time. And really, to kind of button up the Arrogate historical context, this is the list that I have from 1984 of horses that have earned 120-plus Beyers. And I say horses' performances that earned 120-plus Beyers. If this isn't, in fact, the entire list, there are 58 runnings and races on here. Of the 58 on here, there are only 9 horses that have multiple 120-plus performances on this page. You have a couple other ones. You have Will's Way, who earned a giant fig in the Whitney back in 1997. He got a 126 along with Formal Gold. Formal Gold has a few of these races, 120-plus Beyers. But Arrogate, I mean, we're talking about the top of the top, the cream of the crop, for a horse that all these other horses, they were more or less mature, older horses. And many of these were also going much shorter distances, 1 1/8 miles, 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs. The notion that this is a horse that has raced only 6 times and twice he's earned 120-plus Beyers, both at 1.25 miles, on the biggest stages, up at Saratoga, the premier race of the meeting, the Travers, the premier race in North America, the Breeders' Cup Classic, against a horse like California Chrome, who's probably still going to win Horse of the Year. We'll get into that in the weeks to come as we get close to the Eclipse Awards. And I don't mean to give short shrift to California Chrome. Let's throw his PPs up real quick, if we could, if you're on live.drf.com or you're watching the podcast version with video. I mean, these aren't the lifetime performances, obviously, but you can see this is a horse that's in career form. He ran the best race of his career, arguably, in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he lost to this horse. And we know what California Chrome has accomplished. He's almost earned $15 million. He's got giant numbers, whether you're looking at the Beyers, whether you're looking at time form. Arrogate's done this in 6 starts. It's scary to think what this horse could be. It sounds like these two could be on a crash course for the Pegasus World Cup in a few months down at Gulfstream Park, and that's a whole nother discussion to have. Simply because at 9 furlongs, is California Chrome a little bit more suited for a race like that than Arrogate? Who Arrogate, look, he's not the most brilliant horse visually. It takes him a while to get into that stride, but boy, when he gets into it, you can't slow him down, and I think that was the difference. A lot of people, and I don't think it's entirely fair to bash the way that Victor Espinoza rode California Chrome. He rode him with a lot of confidence, and he should have. This horse was, 10.5 lengths clear of third? He had a lot of confidence in the horse. The horse ran a tremendous race last Saturday. He just got run down by a horse that arguably could be, I don't even want to say arguably. At this point, he's certainly a once-in-a-generation kind of horse. Now, it's easy to say a once-in-a-generation when last year we had a horse like American Pharaoh win the Triple Crown, earned himself a 120 Beyer, one of the only other 3-year-olds to do so, going 10 furlongs. It just feels like this is a truly special horse, and let's just hope, again, he's in great hands with Bob Baffert. Juddmonte Farms, they have got a tremendous stallion prospect on their hands when the time comes. Sounds like he's going to run as a 4-year-old. You've always got to be terrified of the unbridled song in him, but at the end of the day, this just looks like he could be, and I mean this in the best way possible, he looks like he's a freak. Arrogate wins the Breeders' Cup Classic over California Chrome in a tremendous classic. The day before, though, the fillies put on a bit of a show and arguably a better actual race than what we just saw in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to take a quick break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, We'll dive into it. The Breeders' Cup Distaff, again, one for the ages. Maybe not quite the passing of the torch that we thought maybe it could have been, but going forward, I think we know who the big girl in that division is. Stay with us, the Matt Bernier Show.
The Keeneland November Breeding Stock Sale. The pinnacle of bloodstock opportunity. Featuring siblings of Grade 1 winners like Caravaggio, Sweet Loretta, Honor Code, Songbird, Uncle Mo, and more. And beautifully bred weanlings out of Grade 1 winners like My Conquistadori, Daisy Divine, and Midnight Lucky. The Keeneland November Breeding Stock Sale, November 8th through the 20th. Learn more at november.keeneland.com.
It's the win, the winner of the Gun Handicap.
This horse is the complete package. He's won from 7 furlongs to 1.1 miles. He's won on dual surfaces. He's won with and without Lasix, and he's traveled around the world and brought his A game with him.
He showed that he was a very top-class dirt horse.
Balance is key, and he was just perfectly proportioned. I think that's what made him so athletic and so efficient on the track. Well, the amazing thing about Outwork was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. I mean, right away, of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen a few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. California Chrome. Away to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
12:12 on the East, 9:12 on the West. The Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live on November the 11th. We just got done kind of wrapping up, buttoning up the Breeders' Cup Classic, and again, we could dive into that race in much more depth. You can obviously see the weekend wrap that Dan Ullman and Mike Beer recorded on Monday. They've got the entire deal, and I'm sure the boys of the DRF Players podcast will have much more to go into that, but I really just wanted to touch on how absurd these two races from Arrowgate have been and where he fits as far as speed figures are concerned. He's still lightly racing, who knows what's to come. But as good as that race was that we saw, the Breeders' Cup Classic, arguably the best race of the weekend was the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We went into it thinking it was going to be just a 3-horse war between Songbird, Beholder, Stellar Wind. Stellar Wind had gotten the best of Beholder on the square in each of their past 2 matchups. Songbird was unbeaten underneath Mike Smith. She had never faced older horses, and she certainly had never faced horses the caliber of a Stellar Wind, or a Beholder. We just wanted to see if it was going to live up to the hype, and boy, did it ever. From the top of the lane, Michael Rona.
Songbird's the leader. Songbird facing her moment of truth past the 3/16th pole. Beholder is ahead back on the outside. Then comes Forever Unbridled, who's making a splash. Stellar Wind is not in the hunt. Beholder and Songbird, a soul-stirring duel. Forever Unbridled, 2 lengths back third. Songbird and Beholder. Beholder and Songbird, a cliffhanger that could go either way. Beholder or Songbird. Forever Unbridled third and Stellar Wind fourth.
Just a stretch run for the ages, arguably one of the best Breeders' Cup races of all time, and maybe you can even go farther than that and say one of the greatest stretch duels of all time. And it really felt like, going into the race, we talked about it here on this show, we talked about it when I was a guest on the DRF Players podcast. It felt like there was a real opportunity for a passing of the torch, similar to a few years back, where you had Royal Delta, who maybe, coming into it, she was still in good form, but not the best form of her career, similar to what many people were making the argument about Beholder. Maybe she's a little bit over the top, even though the figs would not indicate that. Maybe this was a passing of the torch from the big girl to the new girl on the stage, and Songbird threw it down. I thought this was far and away her best race of her career, but at the end of the day, Richard Mandel is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. Gary Stevens is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. And Beholder, let's take a look at her PPs. There's a reason she'll be in the Hall of Fame sooner rather than later. She's got a date with Uncle Mo here in a few months in Kentucky. She's done, but you look at the career record of hers, 18 of 26, and you could make the case that she went out in the best form of her career as a 6-year-old. You also have to keep in mind, this is a horse that's won 3 Breeders' Cup races, 2 Distaffs and a Juvenile Fillies. And in that year that she didn't win one, she missed the race entirely because she was sick. So this is a horse that's just really been a fantastic, fantastic animal for her entire career. And the fact that she went out on top, I think it's deserving. She's been one of my favorites for some time. It was a bittersweet moment for me because she took down really my favorite in Songbird. Let's take a look at her PPs. Finally, there's a blemish. The ones are gone. It's a 2 with a nose. But at the end of the day, I think this was her best race, not just from a speed figure standpoint, but from the fact that I know a lot of people wanted to knock the trip that she got, saying that she shouldn't have lost because she had it all her own way. She walked on the front end. I had Santa Anita, where it can be a little bit on the speed-friendly side, particularly going 2 turns on the dirt. I thought the fact that she dug in as gamely as she did at the top of the lane and didn't let Beholder just roll by her. When at the top of the lane, it looked like Beholder could put on a bit of a show. Songbird, tremendous effort and defeat. We've got to touch on Stellar Wind because Stellar Wind, it's unfortunate. This thing could have easily been a 3-way duel for the entire stretch run if she hadn't missed the break as badly as she did. That just seems to be... You got to feel bad for John Sadler and Costa Hronis because this is a filly that we know is just a supreme talent. She got the better of Beholder on the square in each of the past 2 starts. She just didn't get out of the gate for one reason or another. She stood there. I'm not going to go as far as to say she dwelt, but it was pretty darn close. She just didn't break. After that, completely taken out of her element, and she wasn't embarrassed to run 4th. Also, a tip of the cap to Dallas Stewart. Forever Unbridled is a horse that I think that has gotten kind of lost in the shuffle throughout the course of the year, particularly here on the East Coast when you had Cavorting when she was as good as she was. Maybe Forever Unbridled never got the credit she deserved. She ran a tremendous race there to run 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Truly a stretch run for the ages, and I alluded to it. Beholder, she's got a date with Uncle Mo here shortly. That baby, whenever he or she is born, is just going to be, all eyes obviously are going to be on that one. And as far as Songbird is concerned, it sounds like her and Stellar Wind, they're going to rule the roost out on the West Coast coming up next year. I would imagine you're going to get a little bit more traveling out of Songbird as a 4-year-old as opposed to this year. And not that they didn't travel with her. Obviously, she won 2 races up at Saratoga. She won at Parks. She was all over the place, but it seems like those 2 really are going to run the show out on the West Coast. And we'll see. Maybe some of these East Coast fillies and mares can continue to progress and run representative races. It's a fun division. Fantastic quality, top to bottom in that division. We didn't even touch on Carolina. We didn't even touch on a couple of these other horses that were involved. Really, everything you could have asked for. Again, with the exception of Stellar Wind missing the break. The Breeders' Cup Distaff, I think the race of the weekend. And boy, the fact that we're saying that, considering we had historic performances in the Breeders' Cup Classic, just goes to show how great this year's festival at Santa Anita was for the Breeders' Cup. And look, now it's kind of, we can decompress a little bit. Everyone was all jacked up. We had weeks of anticipation. The event went off without a hitch. Everything went well. Now we can sort of relax a little bit, getting into the holidays, a little bit of the quieter time of racing. But it doesn't mean that there isn't good racing still to come. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to bring you right through the end of the show, right till 12:30. We've got handicapping with 2 races. We got football. I got to get back into the swing of things. We'll get you ready for DRF Live tomorrow afternoon starting at 3 o'clock. And we'll also give you the formulator race of the day for Friday. It's opening day down at Del Mar where the surf meets the turf. Stay with us, the Matt Bernier Show.
Texas Red, second best, and here is one talented colt named Speedster.
I would say Speedster is maybe one of the most exciting horses that I've trained. He was a grandson of Gone West. Another horse that I had trained named Elusive Quality from that line was a world record holder at Belmont Park. Speedster showed some of that same speed. When you'd ask him the question, he could answer.
One talented colt named Speedster.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
12:20 in the East, 9:20 on the West. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. Friday, November the 11th. It's opening day for the Bing Crosby meet, and Bing is probably rolling over in his grave. I'm ashamed that I butchered that when we went to commercial there. It's where the turf meets the surf, not where the surf meets the turf. It's like I'm a newbie. I don't know what I'm talking about. Down at Old Del Mar, opening day for the Bing Crosby meet. The feature race of the day is the Catherine Crosby. We'll get to that later on. It's the Formula race of the day for Friday. Before we do that, let's get into two races. Both of these races will be covered on DRF Live tomorrow starting at 3 Eastern. I believe both of them will be. Let's start off with one I know for sure will be. That's the Commonwealth Turf down at Churchill Downs. Let's throw up the entry card if we could. For those of you that have never watched this or have never seen this, heard this, you're going to see the entry card, the odds to the far right of the screen. Those are my odds as far as the value line is concerned. We dove into that pre-Breeders' Cup and saw some comments, some people saying, oh, it's stupid, you're an idiot. Da, da, da. Well, it's not for everyone. I can't stress that enough. If you like it, use it. I think it's a very, very good tool, particularly if you track your record. If you don't like it and it's not for you, it's not for you. Don't go on with it. This is my value line for this race, the Commonwealth Turf down at Churchill Downs. I think it's a very, very interesting race. You can go a number of different ways. I think we need to start off, really the race revolves around a couple of horses, but I'm just going to base it on the morning line favorite, and that's One Mean Man. One Mean Man is an honest horse. He really is. I can't knock him. But at the same time, he's 3-1 on the morning line, and I can't look at it and say he has some sort of enormous edge on the rest of this field. That's why I pegged him at 7-1. He's rattled off 4 victories in his 5 most recent starts. If you go 6 starts back, he lost by a head to Surgical Strike, who's also in this race. That was over yielding ground. This is a horse, he's an honest sort, but he's not one that I'm really, jonesing to go and play at 3-1 or even 7-2 or 4-1. I have him as a vulnerable favorite in this spot simply because I think it's a wide open race. I pegged him at a 13% chance. I think he's a very interesting use if you wanted to key some sort of an exotic top to bottom, whether it was an exacta, a try, a super, or anything like that. And I think if you're playing multis, you've got to use him, but I wouldn't want to key a lot in on him as far as, standing on him as an A. I just don't think he's got some sort of huge edge. I am very interested in the 4 Hey Dakota. Hey Dakota is an interesting live long shot for me in this spot, 20-1 in the morning line. I don't think you're going to get anything near 20. I think you probably get in that 12, 13-1 range. I have this one pegged at 8-1. I understand a perfect trip most recently against much, much inferior competition at Hawthorne. But if you like One Mean Man, he won the Mystic Lake Derby, I should say, going 3 back in the Canterbury race. If you like One Mean Man at, let's say, 7-2, 4-1, don't you have to like Hey Dakota at 12, 13, 14-1? Likely to get the jump on One Mean Man and was only beaten, what, a neck total, 3 back by this horse? You're going to get, simply, again, from a value standpoint, that's all this game's about. We love to pick winners. We love to feed the ego. But you know what's better than feeding the ego? Feeding the pocket, feeding the bankroll. Try to get some winners and really identify good value. One Mean Man, entirely likely he could win this race. I just look at it and say, Hey Dakota's probably better value in this spot, whether he wins or loses. I'm going to go with Hey Dakota in the Grade 3 Commonwealth Turf. The other race that we're going to take a look at is the Princess Elizabeth. It's a non-graded stakes race up north of the border. Our friends at Woodbine always put on a good show. Let's take a look at that field if we could. 2 turns for 2-year-olds on the Tapeta. Another pretty wide open race. I don't think it's nearly as wide open as that 3-year-old race down at Churchill, but there are a couple horses I do feel are significantly better than some of their contemporaries at this point anyway. Now you can see just based on the value line, I think the 5 Mythical Mission and the 8 Cinderella, they're both big chances in here. You can find both of these races, the full nuts and bolts, on video.drf.com. Myself and Illman, we went over those yesterday. I think the most likely winner in the race is Mythical Mission. Visually, she's been fantastic in each of her starts, one of them sprinting on turf, one of them going long on the synthetic surface. She just looks like she's got plenty of ability to her. You see Endstone right there. She's the number 9 horse from Mark Casse. I think she's a likely win candidate, but I've got her pegged as a vulnerable favorite simply because I think she's going to take a lot more money than she necessarily deserves. You look at the most recent start when she finally broke her maiden. I know she has giant speed figures. She walked on the lead, and there are a lot of horses in this race that have walked on the lead. but there are also a couple horses that have shown true speed, and I wonder, boy, you're going to have to show a different dimension if you're going to get to the front and you're going to win in gate-to-wire fashion like an Enstone, like some of these other horses in here. I think a vulnerable favorite in this spot is Enstone. I think the most likely winner of the race north of the border at Woodbine, the Princess Elizabeth, his Mythical Mission. Fascinating race. I believe that race is also on DRF Live tomorrow afternoon. We'll get to that in a minute, though. Before we dive into that, let's dive into some NFL picks. This has been an interesting segment. I said at the beginning of the year this could have been the dumbest thing I've ever decided to do because my NFL picks historically have been trash. Well, we're below 500, but we have time. We have time. I missed last week. I had a lot going on. You know that. You had a lot going on. You weren't paying attention to my picks anyway, even if I put them out there. I had someone tweet a few weeks ago, based on your record, I should just be fading all of your picks. And I said, use this however you want. I'm not saying you should follow these. Fade them if you want. That's up to you. If you fade, you'd be 12-9 thus far. I don't need a clean sweep. All I've been saying for weeks, I need to win series. I need 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3. Just continue to chip away. Again, the number we're trying to get to is 52%. You got to beat the VIG. The first game, we'll take a look. Chicago Bears at Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks at home, -1 is the number. Give me the home team -1. I just think the Bucks at this point, the Bears have made no bones about it. I think they're a disaster. Jay Cutler got them back to a bit of respectability. But at the same time, they beat the Vikings, who seem to be really tapering off in a big, big way. The Bucks, I don't think, are terrible. It sounds like you're going to get Doug Martin back on a snap count. At the same time, you're going to get Peyton Barber, who did okay filling in last week. Jaquiz Rodgers is hurt. Anton Smith is out for the season. They've got a lot of their own little nicks and knacks, but at the same time, I just feel like Winston, you got Mike Evans on the outside. I think it's basically a pick. That's the way that Vegas is looking at it. The line that I used anyway, again, you may have a guy or a site or whatever you use, or if you're out in the big city, out in the Vegas area, I'm going to go with the Bucks -1 at home. The second game, I haven't picked them yet this year. I picked against them. All my friends have just given me nonstop garbage about it, but I'm going to finally do it. My boys, they're at home. Sunday night, 8:30, the Seahawks travel to New England. They play the Patriots at Gillette. The Pats, when I looked at the line, -7.5. I hate the hook. I really hate the hook because this could easily be a touchdown game. But there's a part of me that thinks you combine so much. I was on the flight back from Santa Anita Monday night. I watched the Bills go into Seattle, and really, they got jobbed at the end of the first half, and they probably, the fact that they kept it as close as they did, makes me think short week for the Seahawks. You got one less day. You're shipping cross country. You're going into Gillette on Sunday night. It's the first time they're going to meet since the Super Bowl a couple years ago. I love the Patriots. I think they've got a big, big chance, not just to win this game, but I think they could put on a bit of a show. And I think Belichick is always feeling like, you know what, if I can, anytime you can beat Pete Carroll, especially from a New England standpoint, anytime you can beat Pete Carroll is a good thing. Pats -7.5. I'm fine with that. I'll take the number. Last game we'll go over Monday night. Anybody here in the New York area will be pleased with this one. It should be a good game. Cincinnati Bengals at the New York Giants. The Giants are home. They're getting a point. Again, this is essentially a pick. I think the Bengals haven't really put it together for me, and I understand they've had a brutal schedule thus far, and that's the reason that maybe their record isn't as spectacular as it should be or could be. I just am not sold on them. They're the most undisciplined team I've ever seen. Marvin Lewis, I don't know how he still has a job. Andy Dalton, I'm not sold on. You know, they got a couple of good running backs, Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're superb other than A.J. Green. And the New York Giants, look, Eli Manning, he's a bit of a dumpster fire from time to time, and I will always have a bone to pick with Eli Manning and the Giants. But at the end of the day, they're not playing the Patriots. I got to try and pick a winner. Give me the Giants at home +1. The 3 games. Bears at Bucks, give me the Bucks -1. Seahawks at the Pats, give me the Pats at Gillette -7.5. Bengals at the G-Men, give me the Giants at home Monday night +1. Let's dive in Saturday, tomorrow afternoon, DRF Live starting at 3 o'clock Eastern. Myself, Dan Illman, Mike Beer. Let's take a look and see what we've got to bring you. Saturday afternoon, all sorts of good stuff. Just because the Breeders' Cup is in the past doesn't mean that there isn't good racing still to come. You've got 2 gradeds at Aqueduct. Fun race on the turf going long, the Red Smith Handicap. Going to be very interesting. You're going to have a giant, giant favorite in that race in Wake Forest. The Discovery for 3-year-olds. Tremendous betting race. You can go about 15 different ways in an 11-horse field. You see the Princess Elizabeth from Woodbine. That'll be covered. The Let It Ride from Del Mar. Short field, but a solid little field. And we'll basically bring you through 3 of the 4 legs of the late pick 4 at Del Mar. We just won't go over the nightcap. You'll also have that graded stakes race from Churchill Downs mixed in there as well. 12:29 on the east, 9:29 on the west. We're going to get you out of here on time this week. Next week, Good chance the show is going to be considerably earlier. I have a wedding rehearsal to go to back in Massachusetts Friday afternoon. So this show may be as early as 10 o'clock, 10:30. It's still TBD. Got to figure it out. Believe we'll be talking to Dave Johnson about the Delta Jackpot coming up next weekend down at Delta Downs. $1 million race for 2-year-olds. But until then, stay tuned, obviously, to live.drf.com. You can check out the news feed below us, all the latest from the news, the reporters, the handicappers, whatever you want to see. It's all below us. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern. Myself, Ilman Beer. If you want to check out this show, podcast version, SoundCloud, YouTube, drf.com, iTunes, you want it, you can find it however you want. To come, maybe we'll have some Twitter, Periscope sort of things. Maybe we'll have Facebook Live. We've got time to figure that stuff out. Until next week, best of luck, and we'll see you tomorrow, DRF Live, 3 o'clock Eastern.